Thank you for taking time out of your lives and out of your day to come spend it here with us. First things first, I'd like to thank our frogs. I would like to have you hop on up here and take a bow, but I think we'll forego it. But thank you. It's, lightness of spirit, frivolity. The story that they actually acted out is one of Yogananda's little parables about the importance of using will through the course of life. I'd like to start the talk today with a reading from Whispers from Eternity, Paramahansa Yogananda's book of prayer, demands, and poems. He said we should learn to pray as the child of spirit, not as a beggar. The beggar gets a pittance, the child gets the entire inheritance of the father, of the parents. This is number 163. Make me feel that everything is joy. I am the foam of happiness, spumed out of the sea of thy joy. I am the ocean life, bounding with the billows of joy. Endless eddies of my laughter spread through all hearts. When the time comes to depart, I will retire to wakeful sleep on the bosom of thy infinite joy, a ripple ever dancing with billows of all joy. I am a bubble of joy struggling to burst and unite with the ocean of joy. I feel thy joy in all things. Make me a lighthouse of joy also, guiding storm-tossed vessels of life to safety on the shores of thy joy. Let every vine of my activity bear large grape clusters of thy joy. Let me drink the divine wine pressed from the grapes of all life's little joys. Somebody said had visited Ananda, and I don't remember if it was the village or the local community or wherever. And somebody asked him how he liked his visit, and he said, I couldn't stand it. They're all so darn happy. You don't find that amusing? That would have been my comment probably about 30 years ago. Because life was earnest. Life was serious. Its goal was to get things done, to make meaning out of life, and we had to be after it, determinedly. And the thought that joy was not only the goal of life, but was the actual process through which life fulfilled itself would never have occurred to me. And people who were perpetually lighthearted and joyful, I would have considered to be superficial, trivial, their lives basically inconsequential. And yet, when my heart yearned for fulfillment, I found myself drawn to people who were essentially joyful. And when I found the path, one of the things, I found the path through the agency of this book, The Autobiography of a Yogi. And in reading it, for those of you, there's some new faces in here. For those of you who are new, if you haven't read it, it's a remarkable read, and I highly encourage it. It is filled with things that I couldn't reconcile when I read it. On page 8, he has people appearing and disappearing in a field. I still have not had people appear and disappear in fields for me. So there are things that I still don't, I have to take on a certain modicum of faith and assumption that he wasn't making it up. But inside the writing, inside this book, was the thing that I knew I had always been looking for and looking for earnestly. I found somebody who actually had it. And the basic flavor of it was joy. A deep, abiding joy through all the vicissitudes of life, through all the things that life would throw at him. And the book is full of things that life threw at him. His mother died when he was very young. He had challenges throughout his life that most of us would be crushed by had they come to us, or crippled by. I have a dear friend, and a really dear friend, whose best time in life was their college years. I'm kind of a little non sequitur, but think about that. If the best time in your life was stuck and frozen, and she's now not a young woman, she's in almost 80, to think that your best time in life was back when you were 20 years old, what in God's name happened in the last 60 years? We went through the earthquake in 1989 in San Francisco, and I mean, it was vivid. It was a lot, and it affected many, many people's lives deeply in the moment. But it lasted 45 seconds, for God's sake, and there are people who still talk about it as if it was a major turning point in their lives. What happened since? And what happened all around it? 45 seconds. There's a story. I don't know why I'm going this direction. There's a story of the comic. He was standing up in front of his audience, and he told a joke, and it was a really good joke, and everybody just laughed and laughed and laughed, and he waited till it abated a little bit, and he told the same joke again. And people laughed. It was pretty funny the second time, and then he told it a third time, and people kind of didn't laugh quite as much, and by the time he told it the fifth or sixth time, there was just dead silence. And he stood and he said, you know, if you can't manage to laugh at the same joke over and over, why do you manage to cry at the same tragedies over and over? The time has come and gone. Things pass. There is nothing. Yogananda, Kriyananda, any great master, the physicists, they will all tell you that everything equals zero. At the end of the day, everything equals zero. It's the law of karma. It's the law of physics. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Everything equals zero. And we get so darn worked up about our dog, our cat, our house, our jobs, our age, our health. Everything equals zero. You know, if you're having a really, really bad time, don't get too upset. It'll get better. It has to. And if it's really, 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 really good right now, don't get too excited. Because everything equals zero. And the masters not only know this, but they know that it's not broken. It's not broken. Because this is merely theater. All this outer show is merely theater. It's good theater. It's compelling theater. And we should be engaged in the theatrics as much as we possibly can. But we should not forget for one moment that we are but actors. Was it Shakespeare? All the world's a stage. Even Shakespeare knew it. The invitation. Think about how subtle and insidious this is. The temptation to become excited and depressed. And the more meaningful your life and the more meaningful the things you're doing, the more that compelling that invitation is. Isn't that true? Oh my gosh, look at this. This might possibly happen, and oh my gosh, what happens if it doesn't? It looks like it might not. The joy that we read of in here, that all things are made of the joy of spirit, gets compromised to the degree that we get caught mentally and emotionally in the ups and downs that attend the drama. And the drama exists in the waves up and down. And we forget, if we're not wise and practiced, we forget that at the end of the day, everything equals zero. That no matter how good it gets, no matter how successful you are, it will go away. And no matter how tragic it is, it will pass. And something else will replace it. I would be so bold as to suggest, everybody knows the word Satan, but it's kind of pejorative. It's a little bit heavy. You know, we kind of shrink when we hear that word. In the East, they use another word for the same force, and it's Maya. It means the measurer. It's the intellect. It's what filters through the intellect, the slicing and dicing, the separating, the this is different than that, and therefore this is better than that whole process. We measure things against each other. I would be willing to suggest that Maya's primary and perhaps even sole job is to see if it can get us to forget the joy. to see if it can convince us for even a moment that God's joy does not exist in this or in that. And the sole practice and the sole exercise of the spiritual path is to not cooperate, is to be in a joyful state, regardless of what life is dishing out. To not get excited in such a way that we lose that deep, calm river of joy, and not to get depressed or concerned in such a way that we lose that deep, calm river of joy. I've watched now Swami Kriyananda. It's kind of fun to look at his picture because you see in there just a radiant joy passing through him. And if you study his life at all, you realize that, and because it's so current, it's easy to study it. You know, some of the great masters, Jesus had a little bit of a trying time toward the end. But some of the other masters, we don't kind of know so much what their lives were like. But Yogananda, we can study it pretty closely, and Kriyananda, we can really study it. And it was just an endless stream of trying circumstances. There's a story about when he first created Ananda, the first Ananda back in 1968. It was on a little piece of property off the electrical grid. It's now the meditation retreat. And they put together a temple as the first structure, and they made it out of a geodesic dome. And these were a bunch of young, Swami Kriyananda, who was fairly young from where I stand right now, and a bunch of people who were really young compared to that, mostly. And they put up this temple, and they had no money virtually, and so they had to really scrape together the resources to do it, and they put it all up, and it was there, and they went to bed, and a windstorm came up and blew the whole darn thing down. And Swami went over and looked at it and kind of pulled back, and he was, during that day, he was kind of exploring it. That night, he went to bed, and he was sitting and meditating, and he was a little bit apart. I think it was Jaya tells the story. I can't remember who tells the story, but they were very near him, and they were sleeping outside, kind of a thing. And he heard Kriyananda praying before he went to bed. And he figured he was praying, "Oh Lord, figure this out or help me out," or whatever. You know, the things that we would normally pray for. You know, here it is. Everything's on the line. He's laid it all out. He built this beautiful temple for God, or however beautiful it was. He built, the first gesture was a temple for God. And it's just lying there in ruins, and all of the resources they put into it just gone. And he listened closely, and what he heard was, joy, joy, too much joy. Oh, so much joy. It was just this sense of freedom and release from all bondage of circumstance. And just the willingness to live in the presence of God, as Teilhard de Chardin says. The presence of joy is the surest sign of the presence of God under all circumstances. And we go, yeah, but. Who here is doing yeah, but? Anybody? Yeah, but not here, right? God is omnipresent. The qualities of God are joy, love, peace, calmness, wisdom, power, light, sound. Those are the 8 qualities of joy. God is omnipresent. Joy is omnipresent. Yeah, but not here. Couldn't possibly be. Or what if? It couldn't possibly be there. The invitation is always to live in that joy. And when we do, the circumstances always find their way in the highest fulfillment. Because that zero that is God is the place where all fulfillment resides. Everything equals zero in a way that's complete, in a way that's whole, in the way that we always wanted it to be. Seek God first and everything else comes. Live in joy and everything else comes. That's the message. Why did Swami tie this concept of joy with intuition? What is intuition? It's the soul's power of knowing God. Again, if God is truth, God is omnipresent, God is in all things, and He is benevolent, which all the saints say is the experience, then in seeking Him, in seeking joy first, everything else has to come. Everything comes to fulfillment with meaning, with beauty, with power. Intuition is the capacity to know God, to know that joy under all circumstances. I pulled up from an ancient Dead Sea Scroll, one of the early writings of Paramahansa Yogananda. It was a Q&A. What is intuition and how can I develop it? Was the question. And the answer that he wrote was, intuition is that directly perceiving faculty of the soul, which at once knows the truth about anything. Unless you have the power of intuition, you cannot possibly know truth. It was the knowing power of the soul without the help of the senses or the mind. Intuition can give you knowledge about things which your senses and understanding can never give. Intuition does not depend on any outside data whatsoever. Intuition means soul perception. It shows the difference between true and false reasoning. Many books and courses of study are prescribed for students in school, but nothing is taught them about concentration and the development of the sixth sense, the all-knowing faculty of intuition. Many people make mistakes in everything, from the study of health and business to the study of philosophy and religion. Thousands of people make wrong investments and take wrong paths because their minds are not scientifically guided by intuition. By the development of intuition, one can outgrow the law of cause and effect in one's own life. Intuition tunes the mental radio so that it can intercept all vibrations of future happenings, which otherwise are deflected by diverse currents. Pure reason and calm feeling lead to intuition. Therefore, the first requisite in developing it is to calmly reason and calmly feel everything. Intuition is developed by exercising common sense, daily introspection and analysis, depth of thought, and continued activity in one direction. Calmness, and best of all, by meditation, holding to its calm after effects. This is the only way. You then begin to perceive everything which is within as well as without. If you can produce a perfect state of calmness in concentration and meditation, when you have a deep problem to solve, you will be able to solve it. If you hold to the calmness that comes after meditation, then you will be guided aright. Intuition guides your reason. And when you have developed intuition, you will stand firm in your knowledge, though the whole heavens and the universe rise up to defeat you. Whenever you want to intuitively solve a problem, go first into deep meditation or silence. Do not think of your problem during meditation, but meditate until you feel that a sense of calmness fills the inner recesses of your body and your breath becomes quiet and calm. Then ask God to direct your intuition so that you may know what you should do. First, try to find out the truth about simple problems. Then, when you find your intuition working infallibly, use it in finding the solution to big problems. For example, suppose two propositions are given you about a business matter. Both seem attractive, but both cannot be right for you. You're obliged to decide between them, and you can decide rightly by your intuitive sense. And then he says, supermen continually use their intuition in everything they do and thus accomplish the seemingly impossible. You know, we talk weekly about meditation and about the power of it and the encouragement to study it, to practice it, to share it, to exercise it, because it is the key to the kingdom. It's the key to understanding how to navigate through life. When we use meditation and the fruits of meditation, which is intuition, we start to live inside that joy continuously. And in fact, the two feed each other, because joy is the presence of God. When we feel this joy, we know how to move. There's a story in this book of Yogananda. He wanted an experience of God's presence. He yearned for it from the time he was a very young man. And he did anything. He was actually, if you read behind the stories that are public, you realize that he was a wild man. He would have done anything to find God, and did. in sub basements where there's virtually no air, and he would meditate for long hours. He would meditate on burning ghats, funeral ghats, to overcome the fear of death. He would do anything that would help him to get past the reactive processes of the mind and enter into the stillness of spirit. And he finally found a guru, somebody who had been there, who lived in God's presence, who could take him there. And he became a disciple of that guru. It's this man right here. And he said this particular spiritual master was very austere. And the training was severe, he said. But he stuck with it. And finally, the path is never how we think it ought to be. The path is never how we think it ought to be. Because if it was, of course, we'd be liberated already. We'd know how it was supposed to be. He's meditating. Once again, he's in the ashram of his master. He's there meditating. He's been at this a long time, and he came highly advanced. And in this meditation, you will probably find this to be a familiar experience. His mind, he said, was distributed like leaves before a strong wind. He couldn't concentrate it. He couldn't bring his mind to focus. And he was feeling petulant. And he's sitting there meditating, kind of in this funk, and his mind's just going crazy, and he's sitting there. And his guru, Sri Yukteswar, calls him and says, "Yogananda, come here." And he thinks, "Master knows I'm meditating. He shouldn't bother me." And he hears again, "Yogananda, come here." And he says, "I'm not going to answer." And finally, he hears, "Yogananda, come here. I know how you're meditating." And so he gets up and he goes out there, and he's just feeling completely defeated. And Sri Yukteswar says to him, he says, "Poor boy, the mountains couldn't give you what you wanted." He'd run away to the mountains, to the Himalayas, trying to find God. He says, "The mountains couldn't give you what you wanted." And he just taps him. He just takes and he taps him on the chest. And he instantly goes into the state of communion, of absolute oneness with God, samadhi. And he describes it in a beautiful poem. If you haven't read it, it's posted out here on the wall. It's in this book. It's in Whispers. It's one of the most remarkable poems ever written in any spiritual tradition, because it talks so compellingly and beautifully about the state of being in that communion. But at some point, it ended. He had to come out of that. And he goes to fall at his guru's feet out of just sheer gratitude for the experience that he's had. His guru raises him up, hands him a broom, and says, "Do not get overdrunk with ecstasy. There's still much work to be done in this world." And he has him sweep the porch. Okay? Because we can become attached to the phenomenon. Even the phenomenon of spiritual ecstasy can become a distraction from real mastery, which is oneness with God. That should be the case, but even when we're sweeping the porch. There should be no moment when we're not in that. And then he goes to Sri Yukteswar sometime later, and he says to him, "Excuse me, sir, but when will I find God?" And Sri Yukteswar looks at him and says, "Oh, you poor boy." He says, "I see that you are confused. You think of God as a personage sitting in some antiseptic corner of the universe." He says, "Don't you understand that pure, unalloyed joy is God's presence?" In fact, Shankaracharya described God as ever present, ever existent, ever conscious, and then Yogananda added, ever new joy. But that's what spirit is, and everything, it's the nature of spirit to share itself, to express itself, which is what we all are. All of this is spirit expressing itself, joy expressing itself. And Yogananda reflected, and he said, Sri Yukteswar says, "Ever new joy is God. He is inexhaustible. As you continue your meditations during the years, he will beguile you with an infinite ingenuity. Devotees like yourself who have found the way to God never dream of exchanging him for any other happiness. How quickly we weary of earthly pleasures. Desire for material things is endless. Man is never satisfied completely and pursues one goal after another. That something else he seeks is the Lord, who alone can grant everlasting joy." And then Yogananda responds, he says, "I understand now, sir, why saints call the Lord unfathomable. Even everlasting life could not suffice to appraise him." That's true, but he's also near and dear. After the mind has been cleared by Kriya Yoga of sensory obstacles, meditation furnishes a twofold proof of God. Ever new joy is evidence of his existence, convincing to our very atoms.